Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Ruth to start this segment. Ruth in Tampa, Florida. You're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call, and I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you very much.
And I'm glad that other people feel as I do. Romney has got to come out fighting. He's too passive. And one of the things about Obamacare that I don't think a lot of people really think about because they're more focused on the medical part, but he tried to make a concession to the Catholics in their objection to contraception and abortion by giving religious employers did not have to offer the benefit if the organization served and employed primarily people of the same faith and was dedicated to spreading religious values, which means, okay, you're a Catholic, you're operating a shelter for the homeless, feeding them. You have to tell this Methodist or Baptist, I'm sorry, Obama says we can no longer help you, because it's been their practice, not to question, to feed, help anyone they could, any way they could. And it's going to be the same way with the Methodist or Baptist. Schools are going to have to fire non-Catholic or non-Baptist or non-whatever, denomination is operating that school, and the children will have to leave. Teachers are going to be fired. Hospitals, I don't know what they're going to do. A few years ago, I think it was with Clinton, our local bishop said we may have to close down our Catholic hospitals or sell them because we are not going to do abortions. So I think people do not realize this. I had one woman tell me Obama has not taken away any religious freedoms, and Planned Parenthood does not perform abortions. And we're spending all this money to Planned Parenthood. We even gave the UN, we're borrowing money from China, paying interest on it, but we turned around and gave the UN $50 million to give back to China to help support their abortion program, one child per family. So I think Obama needs to come out and say, hey, there's more to this Obama than you're thinking about. And this Evergreen lawsuit in New York, that means if we may even have to close down pregnant shelters. We have an Alpha House here that helps pregnant mothers take care of the mothers and the babies. So, they may end up being tossed down on the street. So these pregnant, hungry, homeless, gee, I'm sorry, we can't feed you, we can't help you, but don't forget, Obama cares about you.
Well, it is interesting, Ruth, that you talk about the Roman Catholic Church, because I will flat out guarantee you they're not going to comply with this. They're not going to do it. They will shut down their universities. They will shut down their colleges. They will shut down their hospitals before they will violate their own conscience on this regard. And that's going to be interesting because Roman Catholic hospitals are a pretty significant chunk of the hospitals that are operational right now in America. Maybe 13-14% of all the hospitals in the United States are run by the Roman Catholic Church. If they just suddenly go out of business overnight, and they will, Hobby Lobby will go out of business, American Family Association will go out of business before they comply. But it's one thing if Hobby Lobby goes out of business. It's one thing if they do, but it's another thing if you have one of the most effective hospital chains in the country suddenly turns their lights out overnight. Where do those people go for care?
But, the sad part is some of the polls I've read, Catholics are sort of backing contraception and abortion. They're not remaining true to their beliefs. Well, look at Biden, Pelosi. Pelosi's even said she's in favor of euthanasia. Once you go that route, then you're in favor of mercy killing. Then you're in favor of murdering the disabled because, hey, it's too expensive. Once you lose respect, I think it was Schweitzer that said it, lose respect for life at any stage, you lose respect for all life.
Yeah, and that's why the consistent pro-life position's got to be from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death. So when I read you that story about Steve Ratner in the New York Times, we need death panels to kill off elderly people in the last year of their life, that is as much a pro-life issue as the abortion issue. Because what he wants to do is he wants to prematurely end the lives of senior citizens because the government has determined that their lives are not worth sparing. Their lives are not worth living.
I tell you, I have never in my life been so frightened for all churches and for our country.
Yeah.
you talking about Obama breaking the law. Of course, I think it was LBJ that took away the right for ministers, pastors, to preach in their church.
Yeah, that was 1954.
To sponsor a candidate. But Obama has already asked the churches, to get people to sign up to vote, take them to churches to vote.
Oh yeah, and they got problems. The Democrats and particularly blacks like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, they have absolutely no problem campaigning in churches. They have no problem giving campaign speeches in churches, and because they know the IRS is not going to touch them, that they're golden, that they're insulated from all of that. So they've been doing that kind of thing for decades. The only people that have to worry about it are evangelical Protestants. They're the only ones that could get in trouble for politicking from the pulpit. And again, Ruth, as we talked about earlier, it's impossible for a pastor to violate the First Amendment. It is impossible for a pastor to violate the First Amendment because he is not Congress. And Congress is prohibited from interfering in any way with the free exercise of religion. Now, you can't interfere with the free exercise of religion any more than by dictating to a pastor what the content of his sermons must be. You talk about breaking down Jefferson's wall of separation. In fact, Rob Schenck, one of the pastors, National Clergy Council, spoke yesterday. He said, the reason I'm against this Obamacare mandate is it violates the separation of church and state. Here is the state telling the church what it must believe and what it must do. All right, any last words, Ruth?
Yes. Because of this gay rights thing and such, Catholics have already had to shut down some of their child placement services in some areas.
That's correct.
And I think these are things that Romney needs to show, hey, this is what Obama has done. And he's got to be more aggressive.
Okay. All right. Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Ruth. I appreciate that. Thank you for that call. Let's grab a couple of sound bites. Let's grab, going back to the media, for instance, Pat Goodell saying, look, they become the enemy of the American people. They're in the tank. They're no longer discharging the responsibility that the founding fathers envisioned for them, which is to be a check on runaway government power. Now they're serving as ministers of propaganda for one branch of the political system. But here's NBC's David Gregory actually asking a question. Remember, Barack Obama, the day after the U.S. ambassador to Libya was cut down in cold blood, he's off to Las Vegas having a big fundraising deal, yakking it up. And he knew by this time that this was a terrorist attack. He knew within 24 hours, even though he sent people out to lie on his behalf for 5 days, he knew within 24 hours it was a terrorist attack. And David Gregory asked a question here. Let's listen.
Was it inappropriate for him to go to a fundraiser the day after this attack? Now, in retrospect, knowing that it was a terrorist attack, inappropriate for him to engage in politics as usual?
No, the president obviously is 24/7 engaged in the job of the presidency. He's spent an enormous amount of time in these weeks, by the way, in the aftermath of this terrible tragedy. So absolutely not. A president is on call 24/7, and that just comes with the job.
24/7, but apparently not during UN meetings. As the New York Post highlighted here, a question about whether there was a snub not meeting with the Israeli leader. The president's on The View. This is UN world leaders to gab with the gals of The View. That was the headline in the New York Post with their own point of view there. But is he not performing all the critical role of the presidency, particularly with a foreign policy crisis, with so many questions in the Middle East, when you have a key United Nations gathering not to meet with world leaders, including Netanyahu at a time of so much concern over Iran?
This president has been obviously in constant contact throughout these 4 years.
So that's David Plouffe, that David Gregory pressing him a little bit on this fundraising business, even knowing it was a terrorist attack. Now, CNN, clip 8. You got Wolf Blitzer and a couple of intelligence correspondents. They actually give Obama a little bit of grief about this Libya thing. Let's listen.
Well, and we knew, Wolf, from a senior law enforcement official that spoke to me, who said, we knew within the first 24 hours that this was a terrorist attack. And I think what you're seeing, to Suzanne's point, is both law enforcement, intelligence, real frustration with the career professionals who say, look, we're working this. We knew it was a terrorism investigation, and that's how we proceeded on this. And they don't want to get caught up in the politics of a presidential election.
Because the argument that a lot of Republicans and some others are making is that for political reasons, the Obama administration downplayed this notion of this being an act of terror, pre-planned, any association with Al-Qaeda. They were just wanted to show that it's not happening on the president's watch, and they couldn't be blamed for this, if you will, that the shoddy, if you will, security that was at that consulate in Benghazi.
So that's Wolf Blitzer, shoddy security at Benghazi. Let's grab clip number 10 before we take one more phone. Well, maybe we don't have time for the phone call. Here's Jake Tapper, clip number 10. He's ABC News. Again, this guy does occasional journalism, and he basically accuses President Obama here of lying to the American people. Let's listen.
Sources tell ABC News that intelligence officials on the ground immediately suspected the attack was not tied to the movie at all. Arousing their suspicion, the fact that the attackers knew where to get Ambassador Stevens after he'd fled to a so-called safe house half a mile away. The building was hit with insurgent mortars, suggesting the terrorists knew what they were doing. Some administration sources tell ABC News they were concerned after the White House began pushing the line that the attack was spontaneous and not the work of terrorists. The White House says assessments have changed over time as intelligence has been confirmed. President Obama has repeatedly said the investigation is on to find the killers and bring them to justice. And George, ABC News has confirmed that the FBI, which has been dispatched to Libya to lead the investigation, has not even reached Benghazi yet, 16 days after the attack, largely due to safety concerns. Now officials worry by the time the officials from the FBI get to the site, it will have been picked clean.
So that's Jake Tapper. Now, I got a letter. I may have to go read this more tomorrow, but it's a letter from a member of the military actually in Afghanistan. He's writing his dad, and he says, look, I am fed up. He says, I'm fed up because of the green on blue incidents. We had 2 more. In fact, we're now at 2,000 deaths in Afghanistan because of another insider attack. Afghani soldiers that we've trained, wearing uniforms, firing on American troops. 2,000 deaths right now under the war effort in Afghanistan for no discernible purpose. Well, that's it for today. Focal Point AFR Talk. Back tomorrow with Share-a-thon. Don't forget, we are, ladies and gentlemen, fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of American Family Association or American Family Radio.